Commissioner, that a lot of you in this room are new at your jobs. Great. Because then you go like, what? Why do we do that? Why is, that seems like a clunky way. It seems like we're not being successful at accomplishing the things we all say we want to do. And so I think we agree on what it is we want to do. And I think as the session unfolds, we can find a way to have us get there more intentionally. Working with the department and its new leadership, working with groups like the ARC and so many other service providers. And I'm really quite excited about that. So today we've bitten off a lot, and we'll see how deep we can go into all the topics, but for sure the first two we're going to spend a fair amount of time on. This Vision for Independence part, and there'll be some discussion and much more to come. The second is that we've discovered that the state is not particularly good at accommodating persons with disabilities, which is, if we're trying to help people be independent and work, we need to have good places for them to work, like the ones that we run, that ones that we're overseeing and charged with doing. And so as we can make that venue much more accommodating, more individuals could go there with disabilities, and the whole system gets better. And then the commissioner is going to come up and cover a number of topics related to the first two, and then she'll mention the audit, and we'll see how deep we get into that. If we get very deep, we'll take it up another time. It's meant to be kind of a cursory review. And then we're going to bring up, I don't know which order, min choices and the DWRS and how that's going. And min choices is a means to an end, and it's clunky, and it's not doing its job, I don't think, and you've heard me say that. But so we're trying to make it work, and we'll hear about that. And then the rate setting, some places are on the verge of collapse. We need to be cognizant about that. So that's the topics for today. I think it's really important work, and I want to thank the bipartisan efforts we've got about this. And so, Ms. Zuber, welcome to the committee, and you know what we're talking about, and so the time is yours, so welcome.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Andrea Zuber, Chief Executive Officer for the ARC of Minnesota, which is a statewide advocacy organization that promotes and protects the human rights of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I want to thank you for the invitation to be here today and talk with you about the opportunities that we see our community starting to embrace. I've seen these opportunities emerge from many angles across my lifetime, from watching my parents do deinstitutionalization to the beginning of my own career as a direct support professional and an advocate, and then my work with local counties in the metro area and at DHS, and now in my current role. And over that course of time, my vision has remained the same: to co-create an equitable society for our friends and family members and neighbors and coworkers who have disabilities so that they can experience true belonging in the community. 17 years ago, I was at a planning session, and the facilitator opened the day and she said, everybody needs to share what their dream for the future for people with disabilities is. And so I said, you know, here's my dream. Right now, we walk into a grocery store in a local neighborhood and we see somebody with an intellectual or developmental disability working there, and we say, that is so cool that this place hires people with disabilities. And my dream is that one day in the future, we'll walk into that same grocery store and we'll see somebody with a developmental or intellectual disability working there, and we won't think anything at all. We won't think anything because it'll just be normal, and it'll be so normal that it's not cool. So that's still my dream today, and that dream is shared by so many people in our community, and especially people with developmental disabilities and other disabilities themselves. So this year I talked with a father of a young woman in her 20s, and he coaches her Special Olympics floor hockey team. So he gets to hear the athletes, chatting before practice and games, and he said, I can tell you that they're not talking about living in a group home or going to a day program. He said they're talking about jobs. They're talking about having their own apartment, living with their friend or their boyfriend or their girlfriend. They've gone to school, they've been educated, they've grown up in communities and neighborhoods and churches, and they expect to have a regular life like we all do. So young people with disabilities and their families are really driving this dream and vision forward. And like many of us, they are pursuing post-secondary education, work, they're building impactful careers, they're living in homes of their own, and they're enjoying meaningful relationships. So it is time for us to embrace the natural evolution of how we can and need to support people with disabilities. I just sat with a group of parents, about 40 parents, a few weeks ago. And they were all gathered to learn about how to support their adult children in a home or an apartment of their own, and how to develop and maximize individualized supports, and then how to maintain all of that for their adult children. And the presenter was a parent who had done that for her daughter, who's successfully living in her own apartment with her 2 girlfriends. And what she started to describe in terms of here's what you need to do, she started talking about the hours and hours that she spends every week with foresight and planning and service system knowledge and coordination and communication and daily effort to keep things in place and moving along and working. And she can do that because she has the time and the resources, and she had a really creative, flexible service provider who supported her daughter. But many families don't have that kind of time and resources, and I could just feel the energy in the room as parents became overwhelmed with the daunting effort of what it would take to make that become a reality for their child. So in Minnesota, we have a very large, robust system of care if you want to live in a group home or attend a day program. And absolutely, there's issues around equitable access to resources and flexibility and staffing, and those need to be addressed. But we worked hard in Minnesota over the last 5 decades to build up those options for people, and access to those options now is really what's made the most available for people. So I would say that we've essentially created a parallel universe for people with disabilities to live in, separate from how the mainstream society lives. And it's easier for them to access that than it is to access real life, and that needs to be addressed. So now, I also want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that we don't need a strong continuum of care, which includes a diverse set of support and service options to meet varied needs people have. We do. And I'm also not excluding people who have significant support needs or very significant cognitive disabilities from these hopes and dreams. It's about having the right amounts of supports for them as well. You know, there were people years ago who we thought had no idea what we were saying to them, and now they pick up an iPad and they tell us exactly what they're thinking. So with advances in technology and our understanding of mind-body connections and so much more, the future holds infinite possibilities. So what I am saying is that we need to work on building out the other end of the continuum of supports, and we need to rebalance the resources that we have dedicated to those supports so that people with disabilities, including those with the most significant disabilities, also have access to jobs and a home of their own and relationships and connections in regular life. So we need a network of strong and flexible, self-directed, individualized services paired with informal supports from people that we trust. And stakeholders in our community, from people with disabilities to families to advocates to providers to state and county staff and policymakers, need to come together. And they are coming together to realize this vision. And that is what the ARC Minnesota's public policy values and legislative agenda this year are advancing. So our values emphasize human and civil rights, self-advocacy, self-direction, equity, and true belonging. And true belonging means that we're moving beyond integration or inclusion in a society that was not built for or with people with disabilities, and co-creating instead a society that works with everyone, including people with disabilities, because they designed it as much as anyone else did. So what might that society include? Medical professionals who embrace this vision and can say to new parents, congratulations on your beautiful baby who has a bright future ahead of them because of assistive technology and other amazing advances that we've made for people with disabilities in our community. Strong support from professionals, communities, friends, and neighbors for families to walk alongside of their children to realize their dreams and vision. Investment in inclusive childcare will help ensure that children with disabilities receive support alongside their siblings and peers, resulting in long-term positive benefits for all children, the future landlords and employers and neighbors, and build true belonging in community from an early age. Updating Minnesota's guardianship statute to ensure that individuals retain their rights and maximize self-direction. Expanding access to post-secondary education and training that will help people be better equipped to secure employment at living wages and live more independently. Investing in housing statewide that will give individuals with disabilities the opportunity to live in affordable, accessible homes in their communities. Landlord engagement efforts so that they too are supported in this endeavor. And we actually need to stop talking about housing for people with disabilities separate from housing for all people who experience extreme poverty. We can have one conversation and one agenda to address this if we include the needs of people with disabilities in the conversations that state agencies are already having. And we can't talk about employment separate from housing either. Lack of affordable housing is an issue because people with disabilities are trying to afford a mortgage or their rent on their unearned income. And we need to ensure Minnesotans with disabilities can have work that pays a living wage and expand collaboration across state agencies to create ways for people to get customized and individualized employment support. We need supportive employers who are seeking to hire talent that supports their bottom line because of the skills and assets that people with disabilities bring to the table. And we need supportive coworkers who can provide the informal supports that we all need to be able to get through our days. And last but not least, I would be remiss not to mention that people need to be able to get places. So transportation needs to be coordinated, and people with disabilities need to be able to use the same options that many of us do, like ride sharing. So I've touched on healthcare, assistive technology, education, a home, employment, transportation, equity, autonomy, relationships, and community. And not only will these support the health and well-being of people with disabilities, but all of this can narrow the school to services pipeline, reduce dependence on more formal, costly supports, and lead to long-term cost savings. So you all play a critical role in this. As policymakers, visionaries, and leaders in our state, we hope to work with you to advance these policies that reverse the history of overprotecting and involuntarily segregating people with disabilities. If we want landlords to rent to people, and employers to hire people, and neighbors to be supportive and good friends, then we need to shine a spotlight on what we know to be the capacity and wisdom and resiliency and strength and power that people with disabilities have. We're reframing the narrative from risk and vulnerability to strength and capacity. We have high expectations for people with developmental and intellectual and all disabilities. So back to my dream from 17 years ago of a life so normal that it's cool. Here it is. A little baby is born with an intellectual disability and everyone around her celebrates. Her doctors meet with her parents and explain that there are robust supports and networks in Minnesota and that this child will prosper. As she grew, she attended daycare and school with her siblings, and she played in the neighborhood and was involved in all the things that kids growing up in our communities do. She did chores, she played sports, she spent too much time on her iPhone, and she texted with her friends. She graduated from high school and she went on to post-secondary. She started working at a neighborhood business, and she had encouragement and support from her boss and her coworkers to meet the needs of her employer. She moved into an apartment with her friend and was surrounded by community who supported her when she needed it. I could keep going. She fell in love. She got married. She took Uber and Lyft. And all of this is possible with the will to tap into the abundance that exists in our communities right now and build the supports that we need for the future and rebalance our existing resources so that people with very significant and the most significant disabilities can access the stream as well. Focus on the capacities that people with disabilities have. So everyone in Minnesota is a contributor to the vital network that helps foster true belonging for people with disabilities, and we look forward to co-creating the future together. I would ask you, if not us, then who? And if not now, when?
Thank you, Ms. Zuber. I like that dream. I like the vision. And I think that you've capsulized it pretty well. And this is exactly the comments I were hoping you would offer. And so we talk about money and there's never enough. Maybe there is enough. We spent a ton of money in this niche to have relatively mediocre outcomes. And so what if we looked at everything and is this moving the direction we want to go? And maybe we should take this and, you know, it's not going to be overnight, so don't worry, you're not going to close all your group homes in a week, but they're not the future, and you know that. And they're the future for some, for a percentage, in the same way with the ICFs. People aren't seeking to move into those. Many people who are stable and happy there. I'm not going to try to upset some 50-year-old individual with 80-year-old parents, and now we're going to get rid of that. That's not the point at all. But certainly, Ms. Zuber mentioned the 18 to 26s. That is the point to begin. That is the time where there's excitement and opportunity. And as we look at our opportunities that for preparing for being 18, we're not very good at talking to the 16-year-olds and the 12-year-olds and the 10-year-olds and the parents, like, when they're 18, what are they going to do, talking to the 10-year-old parent? And so we can do this. I'll just take a few comments, and I neglected to, if you notice, I'm sitting by somebody who's not Larissa. Larissa has moved on to the Ombudsman office, and we've been graced with Brittany Johnson, who is going to be an exemplary committee administrator, and very excited to have her here. And, you know, I think we got the better end of the trade. We got Senator Ingebrigtsen joining us here. Senator Rosen, just the finance things were pretty taxing. But Mr. Senator Ingebrigtsen is going to be a great addition to our committee here, and he would like to carry a lot of legislation. So did you want to say anything? Okay. I promised I wouldn't haze him. Anyway, comments from members about this vision for independence. Senator Hoffman, did you? Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Zuber, for reminding us just what reality is about. And I'd like to see those words just embedded in everything that we do and as a filter for what we do, because that's what it's about. Wishes, hopes, dreams, and what our future holds. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for keeping us rooted and grounded in where we need to be and where we need to go.
Senator Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very encouraged by what I'm hearing for a lot of reasons. We have a workforce shortage in this state, and I think that the disability community is one that has been long overlooked to try and solve that. Just as an example, what better person to do PCA-type work than a person with a disability who understands the needs of that person that they're supporting? So I think that in the future, especially with assistive technology and the thought that we have it's not going to solve the problem, but it's certainly another resource that we should not ignore. So thank you very much for your comments.
And just, I guess, one final thought on this, and then we'll move along. We talked about restructuring DHS, and we'll talk about that a little later about they're actually digging in and doing the things I would hope they would be doing. But I think as we talk about restructuring DHS, I think we should ignore the term DHS or any other term, but think, what is the function of the state in this sort of thing? Why is Metro Mobility not part of the transportation part that we do with medical, non-medical transportation? Why is the voc rehab section that serves people with disabilities not commingled with this? Why? And so as I was enjoyed the conversation with the consultant that they hired to look into hiring a consultant, which I think is a good direction to go, I suggested, let's look broader. Let's look at state government, at what the functions are supposed to do. I mean, you can, higher ed, we want to help some people access that, but that's kind of a pot, and roads are kind of a pot, and bridges, and but some of the transit and all that, how do we weave it together? And so I want to encourage whoever is going to be looking into this restructuring, let's do a better job than just organizing one department into a more less clunky way to do business. Let's look at this vision for independence. We spend $8 billion a biennium or something a year. On this part, it's I get my bienniums and years mixed up. We spend $38 billion as a department biennially. And about half of that goes into this very population that we want to serve. As we talk to the people in the audience who have loved ones and are providers and themselves have some kind of disability, nobody's happy with how it's going. We're not like yay, oh, if we could just have another 5%, another 2%, 4.7 instead of 7, or like, really? And so let's think big, and that's what today is meant to kick off, and I think with the ARC and their credibility, and Ms. Zuber with her vitality and ideas, and Commissioner Harpstead, and the rest of the people in this room, I think this is our time. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we're going to move into a topic about how to make this actually work. And for the content that Senator Hoffman will have some opening comments, so I was going to give him a preamble here. And yeah, so if you want to bring all your testifiers up there. This is not meant to be hypercritical of anybody, any administrative person in particular, any particular governor. This is an effort to make the system work. And depending upon how things get reacted to will determine where it goes in terms of any kind of, contention. But, well, I'll just quit talking there. But this is an effort to solve a really key matter, which is on all our minds. So, Senator Hoffman, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and welcome, Senator Ingebrigtsen. One thing I know we won't be discussing is a Muskie amendment in this committee, so I'm glad you're smiling. Well, welcome aboard. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for your time here this morning. And today I'm going to talk about something that has challenged every state and continues to be a challenge. And this is the independence and employment of people with disabilities. I want to thank Governor Dayton and I want to thank Governor Walz for being leaders who boldly chose to take this challenge on with executive orders 1414 under Dayton and 1915 under Walz, respectively. You know, it takes bold leadership to see the horizon and to chart a path forward. And those two set and raised the goal for inclusion of people with disabilities within our workforce. And with these goals, we have increased employment from where it was years ago and to where it is now. And throughout this conversation, I just want to highlight that my LA Kevin Parker did lots of work. And we had over 200 plus staff hours, thousands of emails and documentation from every department, 30 plus candid interviews with individuals who have touched by the programs we're going to talk about. And this is where we go through all that stuff that led us to this moment. So again, Mr. Chair, thank you for letting us take your time in this committee. But we've come across some areas of improvement if we are to be a leader in equity and employment regarding people with disabilities, and we need to continue to raise the bar that our governors Walz and Governor Dayton had set for us. Training in the state is scattered to non-existent on how to respectfully support and work with our employees. Discrimination still exists, and if it is not addressed by the proper authorities, or worse yet, those authorities neglect or suppress the folks that are being discriminated against, there's going to be further disenfranchisement. So accessibility, what I've seen, is an afterthought rather than ingrained, and I liked when you started doing this, I started to think of the collaboration, comprehensive, and coordination of agencies, because it is global. And we know that 25% of people in the state of Minnesota live with a disability. That's 1 in 5 live with one. 1 in 10 live with a chronic disability. And accessibility, rather than being an afterthought, we want to see it built in to the employment and built into even meetings. So I want to give one example of where this works. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has an office in Minneapolis, and the office proactively sought out training to increase their ability to support people with disabilities. So they decided to utilize our own state's resource by contacting DEED's VOC Rehabilitation Services Department. And they received their training and built a relationship between VOC and the United States Department of Agriculture. And one particular placement that was an amazing success is a woman named Karen Betts, who was a state employee And our vocational rehab services prepared her for her work that she was capable within an office setting. The USDA hired her and accommodated her needs every step of the way. With that support, she's had now a 17th year anniversary just a little over a week ago and is their lead tech in handling payroll issues across the country within their office. Her will to work and be independent, the right knowledge and resources, and an office that wanted to say yes to supporting people made that possible. Karen Betts is an invaluable member of their team, and in the fact that she is always invaluable, working together as a state with an individual, we uplifted her to show that truth to everyone, including herself, that the right and respect and dignity paved the pathway to success. So today I bring before you testifiers who have experiences with the state's Connect 700 program, Mr. Chair. You have a handout that covers the basics. I think in your packet there should be a handout that just gives a real one-liner on Connect 700. And there's also within your packet just a disability employment comparison that the state exchange on employment and disability, that advancing policy and a more inclusive workforce, which is a project that's funded through the Office of Disability Employment Policy, otherwise known as ODEP. It's federal, but that's a snapshot for you as well. And then I gave you just two examples of that, the inconsistency on job descriptions within ADA coordinators. Now, this we'll talk about later on. And then, of course, you have a handout that has some policy ideas based upon our many months of work that we've done through, I just highlighted at the very beginning. So those handouts are you to look at and to hopefully guide where we're going in the future. But our testifiers' experience range from implementation to utilization. And beyond that, experience working with individuals with disabilities as individuals with disabilities. Each has their own perspective on what works and what doesn't that helped form the proposals that I'll go over words after. So thank you. And I want to introduce to you the folks that are here. We have Andrea Imhoff, Mohammed Masr Alfas, Dr. Alfas, Kristen Burgess from Metro State, and then Kenneth Rogers from the Department of Transportation. And then Hope Hoffman is here to give a local perspective. And with that, I want to invite Kenneth Rogers to speak about his experience with the program, Mr. Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Rogers.
Oh, you know what we're going to do? Can we get a... Sorry about that. Sure. Let's see. Kenneth, can you move to the right just a little bit? Sorry about that.
Yep, no problem.
Can you hear through the microphone on that, Mr. Chair?
Testing 1, 2, hello?
You guys can hear that okay? All right, go ahead, Mr. Rogers.
All right. So I'd first like to thank Senator Hoffman and Mr. Chair and committee members. I lost my sight 25, almost 30 years ago from being a cardiac nurse at Abbott Northwestern. When I lost my sight, I lost my career, I lost my job, I lost my means of making a living, and entered into that world of a person living with a disability. I've lived in both worlds. I understand both worlds and have a unique perspective from that side. I went to Humphrey School of Public Affairs, received a degree, an advanced degree in public policy, because I wanted to learn how to make lasting change to policy. I worked for DEED, Vocational Rehabilitation Services, the general DEED, for many years. And the reason why I was able to go to grad school and eventually become employed is because of the VR program, State Services for the Blind. Prepared me to learn my skills as a blind, independent person. Without them, I wouldn't be here today. So I want you to understand the value that vocational rehabilitation provides for people that have disabilities, either are born with them or acquire them, and seek employment. It's a great program. Coming from that realm and then working into the Department of Transportation as the Disability Programs Coordinator, which is a fancy title for saying I'm a Title I ADA coordinator. Full-time, that's what I do every day. As part of my role, I was involved with the initial grassroots organization, interagency working group that designed and put together Connect 700 program to present to Governor Dayton for inclusion in Executive Order 1414. We worked many, many hours trying to fine-tune this very old program that existed on the books but had dwindled and pretty much disappeared. Our efforts created some substantial advances to the program, making it modernized and working in our world today for employment of individuals with disabilities. The other thing that I bring to the table today is I understand the spirit in which this program was created, not just the process that was the eventual outcome of Connect 700, but the process and the spirit was to address the workforce so that it looked like the population we serve, as was Governor Dayton's mandate. The program got instituted. We moved forward some practices and policies that we felt were essential for the program to succeed, and MMB oversaw the program. There was to be training for agencies to understand how to implement the program. And this wasn't a handout program. This was seen as a reasonable accommodation to the employment process for individuals with disabilities who had difficulty getting hired for jobs that were competitively fought after. When you have a person with a disability sitting at a table being compared to 15 other people without disabilities, that person with a disability is not likely to be selected in a competitive employment process. So to level the playing field, Connect 700 was seen as a program that would level that field. It would allow an individual with a disability and that had difficulty being successful in competitive process of our employment system, a way or a method to be appointed to a position that was open if they were qualified, they met minimal qualifications, and based on their experience could do the job or was believed to be able to do the job. Connect 700 would give them 700 hours of an appointment process, which was considered pre-probationary, to prove they could do the job. That gave them an opportunity that they would never otherwise have. There's lots of statistics about how many people were entered into the program, how many people were given appointments, and how many people actually converted from pre-probationary employment to probationary employment. But I won't get into that. Again, the spirit was that MMB would oversee this program, give it the support that it needs, and the program itself had built-in supports. Weekly or biweekly check-ins with the hiring managers to identify things that were going well and things that were not going well, so that if support needed to be implemented to help this person be more successful, that could be provided. And that was a mandate of the program that we created initially that was part of Governor Dayton's EO 1414. That eventually got changed to employers may have weekly meetings. That totally blew the spirit of the Connect 700. That was a safety net for people with disabilities to be able to identify what additional training was needed. I oftentimes had people that were hired in this pre-employment process or a pre-probationary process in my agency that I could identify needed some employment supports that I knew that's what the experts at Vocational Rehabilitation Services provided. Yet I had no mechanism or means to get VR help. I didn't have a contract with VR. My agency didn't have an MOU with VR to be able to have services where they could step in and provide those supports for that individual so they could be successful. We're sister agencies, for heaven's sakes. We're in the same system, yet we could not support each other in the very work that we needed to be successful for people that were trying to gain employment. I could talk for days, and I won't, out of respect for your time and my time and the rest of the presenters, but historically, I bring a different perspective to the process of Connect 700, and I'm always willing and available to talk more if you have more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and this is not the only hearing on this topic, and so I think this is the beginning, and so we don't have to exhaust the topic, but that's a very good, no, that was very good. You just did great. And so we intend to, this is part of our action plan here. So Senator Hoffman.
Mr. Chair, thank you. You know, one of the things that I wanted to highlight is Mr. Rogers' office. He had received 599 reasonable accommodation requests, and he was able to do 598 reasonable accommodations. It's just absolutely a system that's working at the Department of Transportation. So now with that, I believe we're going to go to Kristen Burgess. Is that correct? And we're going to get the microphone over to you, Kristen. Nope. Nick's got you. And Kristen is from one of our Senator Abler, Minnesota State, not Minsky, we say, right? Isn't that the?
We spent $600,000.
$600,000.
Sorry, that was my favorite joke.
Thank you.
Welcome to the committee, Ms. Burgess.
Thank you, Senator Abler and committee members. You may remember me formerly as Kristen Jornby when I was with the Olmsted Implementation Office. I recently got married, thus the name change, which is throwing everyone off, so my apologies. Thank you for having me. As Senator Hoffman is saying, I work within the Minnesota State System at Metropolitan State University, and I am currently the Director of Accessibility Resources there, which is charged with doing student accommodations, although we are also a resource for faculty and staff. And I often consult with our Human Resources Department on things like Connect 700. As Mr. Rogers, I'm also a product of the VOC rehab system and wouldn't be where I am without them, as I was formerly what we call a temporarily able-bodied person. So again, that perspective from both sides of the fence. What I want to talk to you about today is really that accommodation process. And we live in an incredibly ableist society, which means that we favor those that are able-bodied or typical neuro thinkers, right? That is our choice, and we then discriminate against those that don't fall into those pockets. We also have a tendency to design things for the able-bodied or the neurotypical and forget to include people with disabilities in our design process. So until we get to a point where we can incorporate more universal design, we will always have a need for accommodations. And in that process, we fail to do that in a really thoughtful and interactive way. We do a lot of window dressing and create lots of additional barriers when what our job is to do exactly what Mr. Rogers said and level that playing field, which is what Connect 700 was meant to do. So the other part of Connect 700 is to make those accommodations that people need. And when we have those accommodations housed in areas such as human resources or other entities within an agency that don't have a good understanding of what that means, it circumvents that process and puts more barriers in people's way. And then the person with a disability opts out of that. They're like, nope, this is way more hassle than it's worth. Or I'm not feeling welcomed, I'm not feeling included in this agency, why would I ever want to stay here and work here long term? By asking people information in the forms that we currently require that are borderline illegal, we are asking for things that are not relevant to that accommodation process. Way too much information is being asked of that individual and their medical provider. So making sure that we are following the letter of the law and also the intent. So when the disability is obvious, we shouldn't be asking for documentation. We should be interacting with that individual and asking them what it is that they need to be successful in that job or in their educational environment, such as I do at the university. And we don't do a good job of that in a lot of places. There are pockets of that are happening, such as Senator Hoffman mentioned at MnDOT. We also have some pockets in other areas of higher education where we've taken that accommodation process out of human resources and put it in a unit of equity and inclusion or in an office such as mine, where we are solely dedicated to access for individuals. Now that hasn't happened within Minnesota State, but it is a model at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and some other national universities that we can look to and then again at MnDOT and some other agencies that have embraced this alternative model of doing that work. And I hope that we can continue to look at that to help eliminate a lot of those silos that you talked about and bring this to a more inclusive and welcoming space to tap that untapped market of employment opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you coming, and this is not the last we're going to hear from you either. And so, compared to just window dressing, I want to build a freeway. And so I'm just gonna, I don't want to hear everybody's thunder away, but I think, Senator Hoffman, as you're going with this, with your really good panel here, what's the law and how is it being implemented? And I think we need to look at both, and which is why I reached out to the governor's office. Do they want to come be part of this? And the answer was at the right time. So today's not the right time. We have just an overview, but we intend to work with them and get this to actually be scored away. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, Dr. Mohammed Al-Fash is here to talk about his experience with the same program.
Dr. Mohammed Al-Fash.
Thank you, Senator Abelar and committee member. Thank you, Senator Hoffman, for offering me the opportunity to be here today. And I hope that you will not have a lot of difficulty understanding me while I'm speaking. A little bit about my disability is that I have been with a disability almost all my life. I lost my hearing due to nerve damage, and it affected the way I speak too. And that happened when I was 5 years old. I was playing on the top of the roof of my family four-story building with my twin brother when I fell off the fourth floor. Since then, I have been with a disability, but I continue to be very optimistic, and I continue to develop myself in both academic and career perspective. I have a total of 6 graduate degrees, including a PhD in organizational development, a master's degree from Humphrey School of Public Affairs in Public Affairs, an MBA, and a master's degree in accounting. And I'm a long-time public servant. I have devoted the rest of my life and career to be a public servant and to advocate for people with disabilities and all minority groups who are underrepresented in our system and who cannot speak up for themselves. As for my experience with Connect 700, I have applied so far to 62 jobs under Connect 700 in the past 1.5 years. I only get hired once, and then I was terminated from that job for some reason that I'm not here to speak about it today. And I think that maybe many of you know a lot about that story. It has gone into a legal process right now, and it's not what I'm going to focus on. So I contributed to the planning and implementation of the Connect 700 program by supporting and providing expertise and statistics to the state crash agents team that was working on the planning and implementation of the Connect 700 program. And I was so happy and delighted to be playing that indirect part because I really want to see the type of compelling state interest that make the case for underrepresented people with disability in the workforce. And to move from the anti-discrimination policy into a more of affirmative action policy, which Connect 700 program is a part of. Then I was one of the first group of people to apply for certificate of eligibility for Connect 700 program, and I get certified just about 10 days after Governor Dayton signed the Connect 700 program. Right after I get my certificate of eligibility, I applied for a job that I super qualified for, and I was excited to be one of the first people to apply. And I had an interview set up, and I was preparing and get ready and get excited to move forward in my career Then about 1 or 2 days before my interview, the hiring manager contacted me to scare me off. When he told me, I want to remind you that you are not going to be allowed to earn or to use any type of leave. I said, even sick leave. He said, even sick leave. You are not entitled to earn it. You are not entitled to use it. I said, but I'm already a state employee, a certified state employee at that time. Why do you want me to give up privilege and right I already have on hand in order for me to get the benefit of Connect 700? He said, it is a policy and I'm letting you know. So it was enough reason for me to decline the interview and to start to be disappointed about the whole program that I once was so excited about it. And I even published the first article with Ann Freeman, who is a great director of equal opportunity who contributed to that program too, introducing the program to the public in one of the state publications. I also looked in the ineffectiveness of the Connect 700 program, that it's a multi-dimensional problem, that we have to consider all parts of it. Just include looking into the VRS program, just include looking into disability services provided by the Department of Family Services, just incorporate many other aspects of the problem that we need to look at it as a comprehensive problem for a comprehensive solution. And I believe that MNB is not the right authority to oversee the program. And I think that a good option can be to assign that role to Minnesota Department of Human Rights alongside with Department of Department of Employment and Economic Development, and with Department of Labor and Industry. I think it will make more sense if we have these three departments involved in managing the Connect 700 after we work on making it improved. Some of the issues that I have seen in the program in general are many, to include that an applicant under Connect 700 must sign a statement that they will be placed in unclassified job at will employment for about 4 and 5 months. And it is very scary to any employee to go under that status, especially when they think they are applying for a classified permanent job. So if you are granting me the opportunity and you are making the case for me as an applicant with a disability, the trade-off is unbalanced and is unfair here to force me to serve 4 and 5 months in at-will employment. Then after that, if I satisfy my supervisor, I will be converted to start over again another 6 months of professional period, meaning that I will be at risk for an entire year. It is very stressful and it's unfair and just need to be looked at and considered when we work together on improving the program. As I stated in my first example when I applied for a job, and I was told that I cannot earn or use any type of leave, including sick leave. This also need to be looked at, and people need to be allowed to earn and use any type of leave just like any other employee. Another issue is the 4 or 5 months of at-will unclassified employment does not count in seniority. The real seniority for the employee who is hired under Connect 700 is start from the date they are converted into standard employment. This also needs to be looked at and improved. By forcing the people with disabilities who are hired under 700 program, Connect 700 program to serve a double probationary period, it is discriminatory, and this needs to be reconsidered. people who are hired under Connect 700 program, they are offered limited representation by the union, like MEP. I have been a MEP employee. MEP cannot help me the same way they help other employees. Even so, I'm a member, I'm paying the fees, and I'm considered a professional employee of the state, but I do not enjoy the same right and privilege as other employees. So, other problem with managing the Connect 700 program is about HR and hiring manager. Not all of them are really passionate about the program or willing to contribute to the improvement of life of people with disabilities and their families and offering them the real opportunity they need. And I'm saying they need, not they want. They need, and the community need it for them too. Because if we do not do that for them, you know, they will be going through public assistance and being economic and dependent and all that stuff that we all know about. So in some of the jobs, I'm talking about reflecting on my own experience. In some of the jobs that I applied for under Connect 700 program, I did not hear about the outcome at all for several months. Then with all of a sudden, I received a notification saying, you are not selected for the job. Based on the policy of the Connect 700 program, they must notify me why I was not considered. And the policy guideline indicates that all state agents are encouraged to interview all job applicants with disabilities under Connect 700 program who meet the minimum requirement. So I just want them to tell me, you did not meet the minimum requirement, and to specify what minimum requirement that I did not meet. So this happened with me several times, and it is happening with me right now. In a job that I applied for with one of the state agents, and the HR staff sent me an email saying you do not meet the minimum requirement, and so we are not moving forward with you in the hiring process. I sent an email, very friendly, very nice, very polite, asking about, would you please clarify why do you think I do not meet the minimum requirement? By the way, the job title I applied for, I have had the same job title and the very similar job duties for 5 years with DIT. Then her director get back to me and saying, if you want to know, go ahead and file a formal appeal. And the formal appeal must be filed within 30 days. And it will take another 30 to 60 days to process. And the hiring process is not going to stop during that time. And you are not guaranteed an interview, and you are not guaranteed that you will get any positive result.
That's amazing. Did you have any more points? I'm appreciating this. We only had so much time that we allocated for this. Did you? Is there any other key points you wanted to bring up, and then in like a minute or less?
Yeah.
Your testimony is incredible. So.
Thank you. And I'm sorry.
No, it's great.
Sometimes I go emotional about it.
You're doing great.
Another point is that sometimes the applicants with disabilities who apply under Connect 700 program are forced into a competitive interview, not the non-competitive interview that should be limited to comparing the qualification to the minimum requirement. And it happened with me that I was required to take a test for a function that is not a part of the minimum requirement.
Okay, we have to kind of wrap that up. So, and then you can work with Senator Hoffman. You've raised some really dramatic points. Thank you, Senator Hoffman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this whole conversation started at a hearing we were at when you had introduced me to Dr. Alfash. And now, thousands of emails later from people. Andrea Imhoff has got an impelling story about the work that she was doing actually fixing a system you care much about and some reasonable accommodations. And so with that, Mr. Chair, Andrea Imhoff.
Ms. Imhoff.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for convening this hearing on the Connect 700 program. I want to clarify the views that I share today are my own and not that of my employer. And this is based on my experience serving in the executive branch from October 2016 to 2018. My disability is not necessarily apparent to others. I have autism. It's difficult for me to read nonverbal communication, especially at work and especially when we're all on our best behavior. I currently work in business side IT in the public sector. I had worked in a jobs and successfully completed probation for a business side IT role at DHS during that time. I applied for a new position through Connect 700, and it didn't end up being a good fit. So I applied again through Connect 700 to return to DHS. In order to be confident that my job was the right fit for me, I revealed my disability by name, and I explained how it contributed to the strengths and weaknesses of the workplace. That's absolutely what I was looking for from the C700 interview, is an open dialogue. I discussed the accommodations I had in my prior job and what I believed I would need for the job I was interviewing for. When I resumed work at DHS, I learned that I'd have to start over with my accommodations request. It took some time to get a doctor's appointment on the medical information needed. Here's what would have worked for me better. I wish I would have been told upon accepting the offer that I would need to start over, so I had that lead time. I pursued formal accommodations so that my adaptations were part of how I perform my work and accepted. While I received some informal accommodations, I also experienced pushback from departmental leadership on basic accommodations such as use of a laptop during training and preferential seating. Without these two accommodations in place, training to perform my new job duties would not have been accessible or useful to me. Fast forwarding a bit, 2 months into the job trial, I could not get my formal accommodations agreed to. This caused me significant stress and compromised my health. As a result, I required medical leave. Informal accommodations in some workplaces might work, but in that job, in that particular culture, informal accommodations reinforce my status as an outsider. I fear that my need for accommodation ultimately compromised my credibility and my reputation as competent. I felt more disabled by the treatment and handling of my disability than my actual disability. I believe that the C700 interview relies on the candidate's candor about disability. So the C700 program really needs the administrative oversight and the staffing resources to ensure that the interactive process with the employee and the manager is established prior to the first day on the job, which is actually written into the program policy. Thank you for your time and consideration.
And thank you, and I know there's much more you could say, but we'd still want to keep talking with you, so thank you. Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a good point. When the informal and formal, when you take it away, there's these legal dances that happen in there, and I think it's, clearly, why does somebody have to keep proving, why isn't our system coordinated, comprehensive, and collaborative, Mr. Chair? So with that, I turn it to Hope Hoffman.
Ms. Hoffman, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Senator Abler and members of the committee. My name is Hope, and on June 17th of 2019, I began employment as a policy associate for the Mayor's Office of St. Paul. I resigned October 29th and officially filed a charge of discrimination on the basis of disability with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights just yesterday. When I started my position, I was really excited to start this next chapter in my life after going through a year of hell recovering from an amputation caused from surgical malpractice. I was born with spina bifida, which is visible in the way that I walk. I have walking limitations. Part of my job as policy associate was attending events with the mayor. This wasn't an issue until I was scheduled to an event that had absolutely no parking and enough walking that almost made me pass out. Following the event, I made a request over email that I be informed if events would have limited parking and significant walking. I received no email reply, and when talking with my manager a few days later, they suggested that I could instead Google Earth it and find out myself. After my request was ignored, my manager's treatment changed towards me, and the kind of work I was asked to do changed. I was asked to make quick trips between departments, which they knew would be tiring and difficult for me. I was asked to clean up conference tables with trays and pitchers they knew I couldn't carry, and then embarrassed me in front of other employees, berating me to ask them for help, which seemed to have given them some sort of satisfaction. They intentionally gave me miscellaneous admin work without clear direction so that when I failed, they justified sitting in on all of the meetings I was assigned to in order to make sure that I could, quote, that I was, quote, able to do the work. I also received derogatory emails, at one point referring to people with disabilities as patients and asking me tips on how people can engage with us. I guess to them I wasn't a person. I filed a complaint with the city's HR department, but instead of resolving my circumstances, I was referred to the city's ADA coordinator, who insisted I write a formal request for accommodation in order to engage the interactive process. The interactive process was established in 2000 by former President Clinton in Executive Order 13164, and clearly says that when a disability or need for accommodation is not obvious, an agency may, if it chooses, require that an individual provide documentation of their disability. My walking limitations are obvious and, in fact, were known. My request for accommodation should have been met as there was no undue hardship caused to my employer, and, in fact, was inconsistent with their own policy, as I received other accommodations during my employment that did not require a formal request or an interactive process, like being able to park in the deputy mayor's parking spot due to the fact that downtown St. Paul doesn't have accessible street parking at all. This has been very hard for me and breaks my heart because I love St. Paul. In the summer of 2017, I externed for Federal Judge Donovan Frank. And the following fall, I interned with Governor Mark Dayton and had some of the best experiences of my life. It was my dream to live, work, and play in St. Paul. And it's not fair that I now fear coming to the one place I always wanted to be. It appears that this was abuse of reasonable accommodation, with department heads getting to pick and choose whether or not they think I should be given my civil rights. But frankly, I don't think it matters if I have civil rights or not. Those can be taken away from me tomorrow. What remains is my innate personhood, which deserves to be treated with respect, dignity, and equality. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Justice too long delayed is justice denied." There's an important question here today, and that is, do we believe that every person deserves justice? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman, and I really appreciate you coming in. I really appreciate the panel coming. I'm going to give you a second to close in a minute, Senator Hoffman, but I just want to offer my thoughts. I am really disappointed. We got a really great piece of paper. Thanks for trying to set it up, Governor Dayton, and to the people who have tried, but this innate personhood, that's, oh, there's a guy working at the store. There's a woman doing something. They're just people. And in this program, it's not a freeway, it's an obstacle course. And I'm so sorry for the challenges that this panel has expressed today in their own world and the loss to the state. We're going to work on this, Senator Hoffman and I, and whoever else in this committee and beyond that wants to make a difference. We haven't talked about counties. I'm sure there's issues there. We can do better. We must. We can do it this session. And I'm going to go hand in hand with the administration and the commissioners of all the departments and Senator Hoffman and whoever else wants to go. So this is very good. A very good start at a really key issue. We want to make people independent. We have to help them have somewhere to go. And the understanding and the empathy and the innate personhood of the people who want to be state employees and city and county and just people, that's what this committee is for. So hope I didn't take your thunder, Senator Hoffman. You get the last word.
Chair Abler, I've known you for 20 years. You've seen my family grow up. And your commitment to righting the wrong is something that people should be aware of. And you didn't take any thunder. Rather, you embraced something that's really important, that treat people like people, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. You know, I have a list of recommendations, and I was going to read through everyone. I'm going to just highlight those, but I just want to say, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, with everything that was presented here today, I just want you to know that, you know, they were born from the experiences and expertise and ideas of those who have helped shape. What you hear here is just the surface of what we went through. And again, it was 200+ staff hours, thousands of emails and documents that we have access to and have. You know, I want to thank Chris Sears and Ryan Faircloth and Dave Orrick, who listened to our comments and to have the public really say, you know, this is not okay, and to see that the folks are listening. And I hope that we can continue. I do want this to continue on, because there was, you know, the candid interviews and individuals, and I'm just going to say to you, the policy ideas surrounding disability employment in the state are cross-sectional. It's not just one department, but it did start right here. You know, we got to look at our ADA coordinators and look at moving them under the umbrella that makes sense. The Minnesota Department of Rights, Department of Human Rights, is the one agency that the EEOC has assigned in the state of Minnesota. It makes sense to coordinate all those efforts in there. But like Dr. Alfash is saying, you got to look at how Deed and Dolly is involved with those as well. So that's going to take us talking to the chair of state and local government. That's going to take us moving that way. There needs to be a disability rights, equity, and inclusion executive officer. We clearly see inconsistencies on how it is leveled across, and you know what Ken is saying about it being the equalizer, the great equalizer. Well, let's get somebody who can oversee that and be an actual advocate to the administration. And I want to highlight this. I almost said Congressman. Our Governor Walz going with what Governor Dayton had started, and I appreciate the bold leadership there. Now let's just follow through. We need to train human resources and supervisors on how to work with people with disabilities and how best to connect those 700 programs. You can see the bullet points under all these headings I'm giving you. We need to support and consult the agencies on queries and questions. This was 100 pages at one time. You know, we need to protect the programs that are established. We just need to do some work around it, but ask the people that have experienced in the trenches. That's why you have the folks that have shown some vulnerability and risk to coming out publicly and talking about this. So I appreciate what has happened today. We need to have arbitrators of the program with disability disputes, and to look at situations as a third-party employer and employee and hopefully resolve those issues appropriately before legal action is taken. Anytime you draw that line in the sand, you're going to entrench yourself. The informal process works. Hence, the example I gave of the Department of Transportation. Why can they find reasonable accommodations in our other agencies? And there are really some disparaging differences in that. But again, I'm not here to point fingers. I'm here to enhance the system. There needs to be a proper evaluation of jobs. I actually have put in 2 different job titles, 2 different agencies, and they're just completely different. 2 items of note along the same vein were brought up by different individuals. First, jobs are not evaluated through the supported worker program, right? Second, job descriptions get intentionally rewritten to discriminate and prevent individuals. You heard it anecdotally here, but we saw that across the systems discussion that we had. Defining and setting limitations on undue burden and undue hardship. Reasonable. I know Senator Ralph said he likes the word reasonable, but come on, put your lawyer hat on and come up with the undue burden or undue hardship repeatedly comes to denied accommodations. And what we knew with that is that shouldn't be particularly a common save for extreme situations. There is clearly definition, if we clearly define it, undue hardship as a floor, perhaps any costless accommodations that directly improve an individual's ability or job function should not be denied. In one case, an individual wanted to have a laptop in front of her during a work session and wanted to be able to pull up the information in front of her laptop because of the sensory overload behind her. And you know what? Simple accommodation. It would cost the state nothing, right? She was denied that accommodation. So those are the stories anecdotally, Senator Abler, and I'll just get one more and then I'll end. Connect 700, we've had that discussion. We'll bring some points forward, but we have the ability to do better as we do in the silos already. And the only obstacle in our way from having a broader implementation of that success is really a question. It's a simple yes or no. And so, do we support people with disabilities to the best that we are capable of as state? And the question is a question for the soul of Minnesota. Statistics do not tell you the most important truths. It doesn't tell you the stories of really what happens after. And it can't convey the heartbreak, sorrow, and helplessness that we give someone when we fail to recognize their potential and instead dismiss them without an honest chance of success. Dignity, equity, and respect are not negotiable, Senator Abler. At least they shouldn't be. While we can't fix the past, we can change the path of our future. And I wanted to offer those proposals to be discussed and consider that we take effective policy to improve the life of all of our citizens. If we're about one Minnesota, we are about one Minnesota. Thank you, Governor Walz, for reminding us that. To the question, I say yes. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and to the testifiers here, thank you for sharing your experience in being at risk to expose yourself as saying this is the truth. And so all this, I see you as being an endless brilliance, passion, and courage, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for hearing this.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. So you're, thanks, so you're all dismissed. And so just, so Commissioner, when you come up, if you want, why don't you bring the three of you just to kind of be together. And so, and to Mr. Parker, who did an incredible amount of work and still is being very good behind the scenes, I want to thank you for that. And so many people contacted us, many more than were here, and so I'm sad but hopeful, Senator Hoffman, so thank you for that. Hi, Commissioner. Why don't you bring, why don't all three of you be up there? Ms. Mertz and Mr. Annett, welcome. And so, actually, the floor is yours. We're stopping at noon no matter what happens. And so, that took a bit more time, but I thought it was really productive to listen to all the in-depth testimony. And so, Commissioner, you can say anything you like, but I've invited you to react to this a little bit as you like, to talk about the Vision for Independence and then the audit, I guess, quite briefly, I guess, and then we're going to move into the min choices and DWRS conversation. And the time is yours to manage between now and the end of the hour. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As a reminder, before I became Commissioner of DHS, I led Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota, one of the largest nonprofit human service organizations in Minnesota, who's done services for people with disabilities back to 1951. Services for the population accounted for 60% of the total work of the organization. I was also one of the founders of the Altair ACO, an integrated health partnership of now 13 of the largest disability service providers in Minnesota, serving about a third of all people on HCPS waivers in the state. So I have some thoughts about how life could go for people with disabilities in Minnesota. But first things first, the state of Minnesota needs to continue to integrate people with disabilities into its own workforce. After Senators Hoffman and Abler brought to my attention several stories of people who said they did not feel as if DHS made an effort to accommodate their needs, I met with our employee resource group for people with disabilities, as I'm doing with all of our employee resource groups, and asked them, how is it to have a disability and work at DHS? I sat back and took notes, learning that many people have had challenges being included in the work in the department. Others have done well. A typical comment was, my last job was tough, but my new manager's amazing. The hero of the group is Alex Bartology, who devoted her life to improving the lives of people with disabilities across Minnesota and championed accommodations for people with disabilities in jobs at DHS. When our hour was up, I thanked everyone for all I had learned, as I want to thank the testifiers today for all I have learned here. And then I apologized on behalf of the entire baby boom generation. I told them that we had gone to work learning to accommodate ourselves to the workplace, and now they are challenging us to accommodate the workplace to employees, and we have a lot to learn. It just so happened that I walked out of that meeting and into a planning meeting for our 2020 DHS All Managers meetings, so I instructed our planning team to put accommodations training back on the agenda of our next managers meeting. We plan to talk about that and learn from each other and learn from people who have learned the hard way and see what we can do to do a better job. The governor, as do I, deeply appreciates people with disabilities being employed in state government. However, we understand it's not enough just for our leaders to recognize the importance of programs like Connect 700, but also that all managerial levels within our agencies do as well. The administration hopes to use the work that we've done within departments that have done better than others as a model for how other agencies can ensure that all people are valued and respected in state government. Beyond state government employees, we've all heard that Minnesota was one of the first, if not the first state, to move people with disabilities out of regional treatment centers and into the community via four-person homes on neighborhood streets starting some 40 years ago. To this day, some states still have people in institutions of 20, 30 or more residents, with Minnesota being one of the 15 states that have closed all of their large institutions. It's my impression, having been in this field for over 15 years, that while Minnesota was indeed a pioneer, as our kids and disabilities grew up mainstreamed in public schools, some did not want to live in a home with 3 other people with disabilities. At the same time, those original group home residents that have been mentioned already today have outlived all life expectancy predictions and are aging in place in the homes that many have happily lived in now for decades. Minnesota has always stood for choice for people with disabilities. Providers have trained their teams in person-centered planning, and these tools should inform decisions instead of assumptions about how people want to live. At the same time, some providers did move ahead offering people new options, like the Hammer apartment model, where people live in their own apartments with 24/7 staff available in the building. Like the LSS host family homes, where adults with disabilities move into a family's home, particularly as they age out of children and youth services. Host homes are designed to provide the life coaching people need to try to live on their own. And in recent years, several providers, including our DHS state-operated services, are moving people with intense needs out of regional treatment centers, crisis hospitals, and other intense settings to community homes with staff, giving them twice the life for half the cost. Minnesota also pioneered sheltered workshops decades ago to give people with disabilities the dignity of work. And some providers, like LifeWorks and Opportunity Partners, have moved forward to brokering jobs in integrated settings in the community, like at Walgreens warehouses, and then at Walgreens stores, sourcing the baggers in Byerly's grocery stores, and many, many more. We look forward to utilizing employment services under the waiver and implementing our MOU with DEED to support people in new ways. I read a book recently by Minnesota author Kim Nielsen, who explained that when Rosie the Riveter went to work in World War II, so did people with disabilities. And when Rosie was sent back to the kitchen after the war, so were people with disabilities. Our next decade-long workforce shortage, as has also been mentioned already this morning, in every job category in Minnesota, should be a golden opportunity to ask employers to adapt workplaces for people with disabilities, to integrate their work into the community in jobs that add to the economy and pay good wages. The development of four-person group homes and sheltered workshops in Minnesota was accomplished in many towns by the employees who had been working in the regional treatment centers, who went on to start family-owned small businesses to create the new models. It is much harder to transform the business model of a small business that has done one type of service for decades than to change that of a large multi-service organization. The 13-member Altair ACO took advantage of a series of federal SIM grants offered to states in the early years to build the infrastructure of the ACO. Then they advocated for and eventually applied for funding from the HCBS Innovation Pool, which has paid incentives to the member organizations for several years now every time a person lives or works in an integrated setting in the community, that is outside of a group home or a sheltered workshop. The Altair members have learned a lot together over the years and even moved toward a common health information exchange technology that would allow them to integrate healthcare and community services, measure health outcomes, and respond to daily patient alerts. It was very hard at first to find healthcare partners to work with them with this dual-eligible Medicaid, Medicare population, but eventually they've broken through that barrier and signed contracts with health plans and added Gillette Children's Specialty Healthcare as a member. Altair received a national grant from the ANCOR Disability Network to work with DHS to imagine how services should move forward for people with disabilities in Minnesota and how they should be paid for, while holding stakeholder meetings to discuss progress with the whole community. This led to a bill that passed last session to fund a consultant to explore moving Minnesota toward value-based incentives for the whole provider sector. Value-based payments could provide the incentives for providers to work toward updating their services while helping us learn what works and what doesn't through the collection of outcomes data. Some community members suggest that the provider sector in Minnesota has not changed in decades. That is not the whole story. The anchor grant that the Altair ACO received put them in a national cohort of other states exploring new models at the cutting edge of innovation in this space. They were envious of the kinds of innovation happening in Minnesota. They also learned through that work and the HMA consultant report funded by Anchor that states that made dramatic moves to cut costs quickly, thank you for your opening remarks, with cost as the primary goal, often disrupted services with sweeping negative consequences. While states that have moved more deliberately and thoughtfully continue to move services forward, combining healthcare and community services while measuring outcomes and cost without jarring disruption in service. As we transition these services, we also need to account for the cost and time it takes to shift organization business models. I'm grateful for the DWRS rate-setting system that includes irregular inflationary increases, and we need to monitor the workforce shortage and determine whether those built-in increases are enough to keep the provider sector stable through change. As I began in my role as Commissioner of the Department of Human Services, I could see we had a list of projects ahead of us, including the DWRS rate system as it moves post-banding, continuing to improve and simplify the Min Choices assessment system, implementing electronic visit verification, and waiver reimagined designed to simplify our complex waiver system. We also need to move forward with more effective models of self-directed and PCA home care, a lot on the plate. And so if I pointed Doug and Anna, who comes to us with 20 years of operational management at Provider Opportunity Partners, to a new Deputy Assistant Commissioner role. Natasha Mers has stepped up from within the department into Alex Bartolik's Director role, as Alex has retired this month, and Natasha reporting to Doug. They both report to the very capable Assistant Commissioner, Gertrude Atemba Matassa, who manages our entire Community Supports Administration. You could say that I'm doubling the investment in leadership for services for people with disabilities, or that it took two people to replace Alex Bartolik's decades of institutional knowledge. This is also the first time the DHS Commissioner has come from this provider sector. These two still have a lot on their plate. I'd ask you to be patient and help them to prioritize their work. They're also surrounded by advocates from the ARC, the Disabilities Law Center, the ARM and more provider associations, the Best Life Alliance, the Olmsted Subcabinet, the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities, the Ombudsman offices, and our partners in counties and tribes. In addition, at least 7 major strategies for people with disabilities are being forwarded through the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission. We are at a very exciting point in the history of services for people with disabilities in Minnesota. I look forward to working with you and all other stakeholders to move Minnesota along to new models that further integrate people with disabilities into our communities with better health, fuller lives, and lower costs. Thank you.
Thanks, and we'll discuss this much more. I have 19 things to say, but I'm going to say none of them and let you move on to your next topic. So thank you, and I appreciate your willingness to engage in this. I think it's really important, and I hope you see this as a productive start toward where we're.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the hearing.
Thanks. So, Commissioner.
Yesterday, we released an internal audit at DHS. Some of you have already read about it. Just very briefly, last summer when the news broke of overpayments to tribes for addiction treatments, DHS opened an anonymous hotline for employees to use to report problems they saw in the processes in the department. Various employees responded, resulting in 9 areas of concern that our internal audit office has been diligently evaluating since. 5 of the 9 areas of concern were substantiated as needing process improvements, and 4 were not. The report released yesterday described the 5 areas of concern in some detail and proposed recommendations for improvement. I am proud of this report. It demonstrates that DHS has been listening to employee concerns since last summer and providing a safe, anonymous outlet for their concerns. It shows that we've listened and followed up to substantiate those that had merit, and it shows that we're committed to taking action to strengthen process controls across the department. Gertrude Matemba Matassa, our new Assistant Commissioner for Community Supports Administration, was handed this report in her first week in her new role. A top priority as she begins her work will be to immediately implement every recommendation in the report. We're also well along on Operation Swiss Watch, our improvement process, and this report will be handed over to that group also, as it contains a list of trail markers that will further help them to find ways to strengthen our processes. Thanks for the extra minute to mention all that. Thank you.
And Commissioner, and then we're going to move into the presentation. I just want to offer you a comment, a compliment to you, but also I thank you for my quote yesterday was taking the bull by the horns on this topic and so many of the topics that you inherited. But I do have to just, as I understand, that I don't know which number of previous administrations in your chair and people working under there were not interested in some of those opinions from employees, and there were some very rocky encounters that went on. And so I appreciate you in your leadership deciding we're going to look at these ideas on their own merit. And I think that as you lead here, that employees will be even more interested in coming forward with ideas. I continue to believe that as that your new, well, the whole gang of you on this alert, but as we move forward in this area in particular, there is enough knowledge and interest and innovation in that building if we can untap that. When we add that knowledge and capacity with what goes through this room, the ARC and the rest, I think we can build, tweak or streamline or tune up the watch or whatever model you want to use, a system we can be extremely proud of that could be, again, nation leading. So that's my goal and a freeway toward innate personhood. So,
Mr. Chair, very exciting possibilities, and look forward to working with all of you on them. Thank you.
thanks. And so introduce us to your staff, Commissioner, and then we'll move into that.
Already did, so
Okay.
let's have Doug Annett. Are you going next?
Okay. Mr. Annett, welcome to the committee.
Actually, Natasha Mers is going next.
And so we have 20 minutes to get through 45 minutes worth of stuff. So we're particularly interested, and I know you wrote us some things, and this is just how it goes, you know. We're interested in, you know, why you need to outsource your min-choices technology and what's going to happen to the people who suffered severe rate cuts at the hands of DWRS, as well as whatever else things you want to cover. So if at least you can cover those two topics as well as the rest, that'll be awesome. Thank you. Mr. Annett, welcome to your job and to the committee.
Thank you.
Oh, who's first? I'm sorry. Sorry. Ms. Mertz, welcome too.
Thank you, Senator Abler and members of the committee. Thank you for having me. So I will provide a high-level overview of where we're at with min-choices and then hand it over to Doug to talk about the DWRS system and where we're at with that. So I think it's helpful to spend a couple minutes just talking about where we were before the min-choices application launched. And so prior to min-choices, assessments for big categories of long-term care services and supports were handled on paper-based and separate assessments. So a person would have to know kind of what program or service to ask for and then have an assessment specific to that program. And then if they identified a need for an additional service or support, have yet another assessment and another visit and potentially yet a third. So the min-choices application combines those assessment processes, both in terms of being eligible for programs, but then also really informing and starting to lay the foundation for support planning for people. The other thing that's important to know about the system before min-choices is we didn't have a statewide infrastructure for training assessors and helping them understand how to have conversations with people, how to assess for eligibility. And we also lost all the data. We couldn't create or develop data on people in terms of how they answered their assessment questions, which was really limiting our ability to learn from that aggregate data about what's really working for people in the assessment process, whether services are working or other related things. So Min Choices brings benefits to all those different sectors and spheres. So I know that the committee is most interested in understanding where we are now with Min Choices, including the reason why we chose to go to RFP, and so I will address those. And the other thing to understand or follow up, this graphic represents just an identification that the assessment process is more than just an in-person interview. It includes documentation and follow-up, a support plan that is automatically generated from the assessment material, as well as a relatively new improvement tool, which allows us or allows a case manager to visit with the person about mid-year through their support plan and find out how things are going, whether the services are meeting expectations, meeting needs, meeting goals, and be able to make dynamic adjustments within that same year, as well as provide the department with additional data on how to continuously improve our system. And I'll just say briefly, also by way of foundation, that it's important to know that Min Choices isn't actually determining the financial eligibility for programs and services. It will determine program eligibility, so what services and supports a person could potentially benefit from. But being eligible for the Medicaid program happens through a different channel, usually through the county or lead agency, where people are providing information about their income and assets to make sure that they financially qualify for the program. So just to know that that's a separate and related process, and we are still looking at ways that we can align and streamline those, because we understand that that financial eligibility determination processes creates barriers for people and isn't as efficient and streamlined as it ought to be. So when Min Choices launched, there was a significant learning curve for all of us involved. And you know, we can talk through, if that's of interest to the committee, what some of the lessons we learned were, but we knew that it was learning curve for both the department staff, our county partners, and people that were getting assessments and depended on the services and supports that Min Choices was giving them access or eligibility towards. We also know and learned and know that the technology platform that the current Min Choices version sits on was not always stable. And that instability on that technology platform led to unplanned outages and functionality that wasn't where it needed to be to properly serve and support people and help assessors do their job well. So in order to address the instability of the current platform, we have a two-pronged approach, kind of a short-term and a long-term approach. In the short term, we're working closely with our partners in Minute to make sure that the current platform has the technology support that it needs to maintain its stability and enhance some current functions. And so while we are working on making sure that the current technology is stable, and we are creating some enhancements and planned outages to create and program those enhancements, our lead agency partners are working with us to help us identify what are the most important efficiencies and enhancements to them right now so that we can make those in the current platform. So that's the short-term solution. And the long-term solution is an RFP to solicit bids and proposals from vendors from the private tech market to build us the next version of Min Choices, often referred to as Min Choices 2.0. And one of the key requirements, or one of the key things that we will need from this new platform, will be increased system availability or stability, and then also the ability to make dynamic enhancements as we continuously learn and improve how to make this tool work better for people that use services and easier for assessors to navigate and work through. And so a couple of the goals of the enhancements that are currently being made or in development for the current platform really includes, again, that stability and decreasing lag time. And then we are looking forward to the RFP for a vendor to help us develop a solution for the next iteration of Min Choices that will, among many things, help reduce the number of required questions in the assessment. Organize the assessment in a way to make the tool more navigable so assessors can have dynamic conversations with people rather than having to kind of read through a rote set of questions that feels like an interrogation rather than as intended as a conversation. And we've also are working on additional training and beefing up our statewide training infrastructure so that assessors have the tools and supports they need to do a really good job and be successful not only using the technology tool, but doing the very complicated work of meeting people in their homes and talking with them about really sensitive and private things and trying to use conversational interviewing skills and things like that to make those assessments the best experience possible, while understanding that they are difficult for people and intrusive, and we want to make sure that we're acknowledging those dynamics throughout the process. So, DHS and Minute posted a request for proposals for the next solution for Min Choices on December 5th, and the RFP should be in your committee materials so you can get a sense of where we're going and what we're looking for. I will also say that the requirements in the RFP were informed by a lot of stakeholder engagement with our county partners to really determine what should the next version of Min Choices really look like in order to accomplish all of those different policy goals that I've talked through. And at its core, we are also thinking about this as a continuous improvement process. So we have a short-term continuous improvement process for the current application, and then following that, the next version solution that will come from a private vendor that will really help us maximize and leverage all the technology evolution that has occurred in the market since Min Choices was launched. One thing to note is that the request for proposals, and I should say that request for proposals closes on January 31st. So following that, the Min Choices team and the Minute team will be working hard to score and evaluate vendors. And once we've identified those, we will invite lead agency representatives to attend presentations from the identified vendors and provide feedback to DHS. So it's another step on the engagement process where we really did engage with our county partners to develop the business requirements for the RFP, and then we'll be able to get feedback via the vendor presentations when those occur. And so the last thing I'll say is Min Choices really is designed to eliminate disparities in access to services for people. And we're committed to our ongoing partnership with Minute, to our lead agency representatives, and to hearing feedback from people that use services and use the assessment tool to make sure that this product is the best it can be for Minnesotans and serves its purpose and is a part of a comprehensive assessment that really helps and supports people that use services. And that is the end of my time, Mr. Chair.
I have just a couple of questions, and then Senator Bigham. Where in the Min Choice process do they decide where the person is going to live?
So that happens through a conversational interviewing process, and we can certainly, I won't be able to tell you exactly where in the application that question is asked. We can certainly follow up with some technical assistance and get you really specific information if that's useful.
I'll just tell you what I'm getting at, so you don't have to try to all that. At some point, where someplace they're going to go to a group home. That's the gravitational pull moves them to that. So when does it say? So this is a question for later. So I would really like it to be that the default setting is they're going to live independently somewhere in the Hammer thing or in just whatever, just something interesting that's not a 4-person group home. And when they're discussing employment, I don't want it to be a DT&H as the gravitational pull. But that's just, I think a lot of people feel that way. We heard from the ARC about the 18 to 26s, they don't want either of those. But if it's just easy, then you just go there, well, we'll see what we can do later, and then later never happens. And so I'm interested for later discussion, where does the supposition come in this process? And if it's not there, we need to find a way to create the supposition about that they're not going to be in a place, they're not going to be in a sheltered workshop thing. And so then, oh golly, you do need to be in a group home. You do need, then you have to kind of need that. So that's I'll leave it at that. And training is everything. I'm really concerned about the reliability, inter-user, inter-assessor, and that's not going to go away no matter what you do to fix your software. And I told Alex, if everybody was her, there'd be no question about this. And she has been just to commend her again in her retirement. She's been just a remarkable asset to the state of Minnesota. And it takes 2-person to replace her, and good for you both. Senator Bigham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know it's been a while since we've been together, so I don't know if you know this, but I used to be a county commissioner Washington County. And I'm doing that for Ingebrigtsen's
I don't think Senator Ingebrigtsen
edification
knew
too.
that. He hadn't heard that 14 times.
Yeah, I don't think he has.
Comes up in his committee, I think, too.
So I think the premise, Mr. Chair, of MnChoices obviously is good, but it definitely was not without its flaws. And I remember in 2017 being on the board and being so excited that we got a bump in county program aid just to turn around and have the state's portion of this cost be shifted down to counties, negating their bump in county program aid. And what I would say is, if we're going to shift this to counties, it better work, and it really hasn't. I've had meetings with the department as recently as, I think it was just about a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And while I'm appreciative of the 2.0 and trying to get there, I spoke to counties, your county, my county, and you have a subject matter expert as your county administrator. And so one thing I'm going to ask of you is maybe the three of us can sit down, because I think we do need to give better direction on this topic, and I appreciate you bringing this up. But for brevity, I'm going to just say that not only should the assessment part we cover, that's covered, for payment, but the follow-up isn't. And that's really dependent upon, I think, different counties, because it's different needs for different counties. But it should be. And I still am going to retain the position, and I know that the counties would, that until this thing works, they shouldn't have to bear the cost of it. It's like selling somebody a car that doesn't work, and all right, there you go, it's your car. And it's not fair, and it's not fair for the end user. It gives frustration, goes right back to what you're saying, Mr. Chair. It's not fair to their family, to their loved ones, to the people that need these services the most. And so while I applaud you for continuing trying to improve this, let's see what the RFPs say and what you get back with that. But this is a bigger problem than I think we care to admit financially, but also just being able to provide services that these folks need and deserve and expect.
Yes, and Senator Bingham, your county's loss is our gain. But so just, and I've said at least 50 times, it's like $250 million a biennium, and it's paid for in random moment time study. We'll be talking about that. There'll be more discussions about this. We're negotiating or something about how we might change that, which is a clunky format. And there's no encouragement to be efficient by a county. You just get paid for being inefficient. And then the reliability issues and all that. So I'm glad you're welcome aboard to this topic. So we could talk all day about this. We're not going to. Mr. Annett, thank you, Commissioner, or whatever your title is. So if you could get to DDORS and just kind of skip the history part and move into the current events part of it. This committee is really pretty versed on that topic. So maybe if you can just kind of hit the highlights of what's going to happen to these places so they don't shut down. That's my big interest, and there's some people in the audience that are worried about that. But just kind of to just move into the present time and forward, if you will.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, Senators. So just to give a little bit of a level set, the DWRS system started in 2013 to replace the county negotiations that we would do. As I come from the provider world, so I still utilize that particular framework sometimes when I answer these questions. But historically, we had negotiated directly with counties for services, and that was replaced by the DWRS system, which began in 2013, to create a uniform and transparent system to develop rates for people with disabilities and their services. There's a 6-year banding period, which allowed the state of Minnesota, both DHS and the legislature, to look at the different rate components, adjust those as they deemed fit for launch, which it occurred January 1st, 2020. So it's launching as we speak. For people who are receiving services, their rates will change at their service annual time when they get a renewal of their rates. So the banded rate, which has protected their rate for the past 6 years, will fall away, and a new DWRS rate will be allotted to them for their services. So the things that have been done so far to boost those rates and to deal with them, providers are going to receive rates that have received substantial evaluation from the department, from the legislature. There's been legislative component value increases to a variety of the different cost drivers that make up those particular rates. There's been inflationary updates, and then this year there is also a competitive workforce factor that's been applied to those rates as well. Looking at the statewide impact of what these rates look like for providers, the average rate increase is roughly 14.1% after banding. This is before the addition of the workforce factor, with 65% of providers' service lines experience a net rate increase. And with this particular PowerPoint, there's 4 essential categories of services: our day services, residential, as well as unit-based without programming, and unit-based services with programming. Within these different categories, there's a variety of different service lines that people might utilize within their day services and residential and whatnot. As a whole, some of those lines go up, some of those lines go down, but the categories all go up statewide as an average. And how that affects an individual provider is really going to depend upon their particular book of business and what their particular service lines they utilize within their delivery of services. It's going to depend on what their negotiated rates were with the counties and how they were impacted by those DWRS rates going forward. So to make a broad generalized statement of how all providers are going to fare under DWRS, it really depends upon what their business model looks like. And I think a really key component to all of this, what our next steps really are, is in 2020, we're going to start to gather cost reporting data from all of the providers to get a better detailed picture of what those cost drivers are. Over the past 2 years, the department has developed a cost reporting tool that was piloted this summer. As a provider, I helped with the testing of that and reporting the data that we had as an agency to share with the department, and that data will be used by the department. We're going to evaluate that, figure out where we're falling short in some areas, where we can make adjustments. We will share that with the legislature so that you guys can make decisions on how to best allot our funds and how to adjust those particular rates so that they are going to be most effective for meeting the needs of the people and what kind of services they want to support.
Thanks, Mr. Annett. And just see, it's interesting to see, we can discuss how we can allot your funds. Let me just, you've been only in that chair for a little bit. In your old chair, us suggesting how they might allot their funds is quite a dialogue, and it doesn't always go very well. So usually the department likes how their funds are allotted. But so welcome to this job, and I appreciate both of your all 4 of your backgrounds. So I have a question for later. 65% are going up and they're happy. The 35% that are going down, I'd like to know first what types of providers they are and just quite a bit of information on that. And so I know some of those are the high rate, day programs that their rates are unsustainable, and I've communicated with some of those folks. I'm curious if there's another demographic or another pot of individuals for a later discussion. So you can continue on if you have more to say. Or is that it?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about the system as a whole within both MnChoices and DWRS. This is really representing a significant transformation of services and how we deliver services. For many years, we've relied on a small amount of models to deliver those services, and as we're going forward, we're trying to create a lot more customizability for individuals to meet their very specific needs, and we're trying to build statewide tools that can be readily applied across a vast population of people with disabilities. 10% of Minnesotans identify themselves as having a disability, and that is a very diverse population. We're trying to meet the needs of that very diverse population. And these are tools that are going to take a lot of work for us to fine tune and to develop over time. We're going to need this data that we are collecting, not only from this cost reporting, but from our stakeholders out there, from ARC, from ARM, from MORE, from the feedback from the legislature to continue to work on this service. we have a long way to go, I think, to really build the services that we want to build, but that's what our challenge is, and that's what we're here to do.
Well, thank you. And actually, I'm just going to wrap up with one of your own statements. The very last thing up there is a really nice statement. And so DHS is committed to working with our partners to ensure our system addresses not only what's important for a person, but also what's important to a person, their preferences, goals, hopes, and dreams. And I think if you, into that DHS, you include the ARC, if you include our partners, our clients, the Senate, the House, and I think if we can make that the highlight of the session, that kind of summarizes today, I think. A vision for independence, a vision for helping people achieve their preferences, goals, hopes, and dreams. That means they get to have them. And I think that ends this discussion on a very good note. I think we're well on our way to helping that come true in Minnesota. So, Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Mr. Chair, thank you. And one would wonder why somebody from the hook and bullet crowd or the sheriff's office career would be interested in this, but I'll have to say that over my years in the other life, before coming here, I had some of my greatest experiences with people with disabilities, and I care an awful lot about them. I specifically am involved in a 60-year-old brother-in-law, Down syndrome, gentleman, sweetheart, I might add, that has lived with us in our setting, and we've now moved him into a host home. And just want to say what a great thing that is and has been for him, who's somebody who's lived with his family his whole life, and now he has this independence, this little smile about him, his place. And there's some problems getting the rest of the family to understand that. However, there's some really good work going on there. So I really look forward to working with you. And no, I won't be coming forward with any musky stuff. But and as for the commissioner over there, when I was sheriff, I represented the whole county, not just 1/5. So you can tell we've talked about that before. So thank you very much.
Comes up.
Glad to be on the committee.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you here. I hope people feel a sense of optimism and direction and kind of some fresh air. A lot of good things. Some are kind of dusty. Some need a little, whatever that Swiss watch tune-up thing you do with, you don't use a hammer, you use a little screwdriver. And so we have a lot of work ahead. Please all join us together to accomplish helping people achieve their preferences, goals, hopes, and dreams. See you in a couple weeks. We're adjourned.